Hey guys, welcome back to Chris and Retro. Today's guest is a personal friend of mine and somebody that has been I've known since really the early stages of my recovery in 2017. We served on a Finger Lakes recovery committee together. I think is what it was called. I forget what the title of the meeting was, or what was that group that we were part of?
The treatment committee.
Treatment committee. That's what it was. And the whole point was to bring meetings into local rehabilitation facilities. Um, I've seen the true Kayla in terms of how authentic she is, and she's one of the people I appreciate most because she's been consistent through this journey. One of the more consistent people that I've seen through the whole thing that I've experienced. There's a lot of people that come and go, and Kayla always seems to be here. So I that's something I've appreciated. She's a peer. She's still doing work beyond peer work now. Now she's advanced her career in
Mhm.
treatment and is at a different provider than what I knew her at. Um, she's got a remarkable story, candidly. There's a lot of craziness in it, but it's remarkable. And I'm thankful that Kayla's my friend. They call her Lala, and as she says, they now call her Mama. Welcome to the show, Kayla.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, it's me and the two unborn twins, hence why it's Mama instead of Lala now. But
Yeah,
don't
no,
get it twisted. I'm still Lala like the land inside my head up pretty often. So
I didn't expect that everything was going to change.
yeah,
That
no. Baby
in
brain did me no favors.
Exactly. I remember one of my first impressions of you is that you were genuine and sincere, and you really wanted to help somebody, but you definitely let people know what's up. You have that ability to lay the bomb in the room of truth. Whenever nobody else will say it, you'll lay the truth out there, which is really good because I think a lot of times we avoid telling reality and dealing with reality. We like to deal with like this veiled conversation, and you never do that. It's something I've always respected about you. I like my audience. I mean, this audience is really about kind of a cautionary tale. So the slogan here, closer than it appears, really means like we have to live this high risk living and we don't realize total collapse is like literally right there. It's one moment
Hmm.
from everything going away. But at the same time, when it all is falling apart, hope's a lot closer than we think it is too. Sometimes that's one moment away. And when I think of your story, I think very much of that. So if you want to get in, share with my audience a little bit about what brought you to this place.
Well, I'm from Rochester, New York, which right now has been going through, well, really for a couple decades now, a pretty hard drug epidemic between crack cocaine and then heroin, now fentanyl. Um, I come from a kind of dysfunctional family where, I wasn't raised in a two-parent household. Um, and I was also born with deformities in my two lower legs. So I had one foot amputated when I was a baby, the other one when I was 9, and then I had 6 knee surgeries through middle school. And interesting enough, this was kind of around the time that the ADA was first passed, and so in my experience, they never really knew what to do with me. Because they've always been trying to figure that out. They're a lot better about it now. But, as I got older, I just didn't cope well with a lot of things and I got into a bad crowd. I missed a lot of middle school, a lot of school in general, so I just kind of was like, oh, well, the people who smoke cigarettes on the side of the school, and
Mhm.
skip class, like they're more accepting of me. And it made me feel part of, which I hadn't been able to kind of feel in most of my life. So, I kind of pursued that, and my addiction took over pretty quickly from a very young age. Um, my mom kicked me out when I was 13. I went to go live with my dad. His wife at the time, didn't appreciate all the stress and chaos I was bringing into the household. And ultimately, I've been on my own since I was 17 and going in and out of jail. And that is eventually where I kind of, eventually got sick and tired of being sick and tired and found some sort of level of hope that I could hold on to, that maybe like I could get better, that I had some sort of purpose and self worth in the world. Because I truly believed, because I was missing feet, that I wasn't a whole person, and I didn't have the same value as others.
I think that's a thing that people don't understand when they first, when you, because you're pretty open about, your disability. And I think that
Mhm.
it's actually empowering to a lot of people that are around you. But I think there's an assumption that that was brought on by addiction at times when people don't know you and you realize that this was what you were born with. This is like part of something right out of the gate you had to deal with. And I'm not sure that, I think as human beings, qualify people based on that. And so that's probably how you felt, is like, you felt like less of a person. I had one guest on here one time that felt because she was too tall that she was not, like, there was all this, self-worth stuff that she struggled with
Yeah.
too, just because she was way, way taller than all the other girls. So she just felt like this completely like non-belonging human being.
Yeah. Yeah, like I physically was not the same as others, it's so tangible, compared to a lot of the intangible things that I mean, I also suffer with, but that a lot of other people suffer with.
Right. So you got to that place where, I mean, you talk about being 13 and the chaos and stuff like that and being moved around. I mean, if I, for the audience that probably is tuning in because you are around addiction, either for yourself or the family members that struggle with this whole thing, it's tough. I mean, we bring a lot of chaos to the environment we're in. So in
Yes.
some respects, you kind of look at them and go, well, how could you throw your loved one out? But on the flip side of it, it's like, man, we really do blow up people's lives.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, in sobriety, one of the things I've had to learn how to balance is, the boundaries between what I can allow into my life, and it's kind of helped me find, reframe my perspective, where I have like a lot more forgiveness and understanding through the times when people had to practice those similar kind of boundaries with me.
Mhm.
Um, there is something to say sometimes for tough love.
Yeah.
uh, in jail, honestly, you want to talk about tough love, like being, forced in a cage and told to sit down. Enough times I eventually kind of had like that spiritual moment where um I just was like done.
Mhm.
And also, there is a woman who would bring meetings in every Wednesday, whether she had someone to come with her or not. And it was, I've been to 5 different jails in 2 different states. So let me say, I'm criminal justice impacted. I've had to do a lot to turn that around and, further my career and whatnot. But the good thing that came of it was there was a woman who'd bring meetings in, and we would often use it as an opportunity to kind of gossip with the other girls
Mhm.
and, trade coffee and stuff. And, I don't remember the circumstances, but I know she had had a bad week or day, something, but she came anyways. And I asked her, and I'm like, miss, why would you bring a meeting into us ungrateful inmates if you're having a bad day? And I made it a joke, like, oh, well, we're not going anywhere. And
Mhm.
she said, I can only keep what I have by giving it away. And to
So
this
true.
day, yeah, I can't always even reconcile in words like what that meant or did to me, but it was like, wow, like that's a way to build and find worth within myself, like even though I'm maybe only 80% of a person, as I like to joke around, um, I have things to give and share, and by doing that, I can keep them and get better myself.
Right. I think that so you talked about tough love there for a little bit, and the point I made early on with you is I think that you do understand and have empathy for people's situations more so than most people do when you're giving people advice. But you're also not going to play along with the game with them.
Mm-mm.
You'll understand the intersection where this is becoming manipulation of you
Right.
versus acknowledgement of their circumstances. Because I think a lot of times when we're working with people that are struggling, I know for me, um, the conversation about empathy could only go so far. There had to be a break point where we started talking about, okay, now what are you going to change in you? That whole portion about acceptance is that it's not so much about what needs to be changed in the world; it's about what needs to be changed in me. That also is part of a conversation that breaks. So it can only, if I'm talking about all these things that are happening to me and this world that sucks around me, and like you were talking about, I'm in 2 states with multiple charges and all this other stuff going on. At some point, it's okay. So what are we going to do about it?
Right. I'm the common denominator
Yeah,
here, you
exactly.
know?
I'm here to help you
Um,
figure this out.
yeah. And I've found, like to speak on, first of all, with working with others is, and from my own journey in recovery, is we kind of have like that, we want to live in a place of wishing, like
Mm,
just wishing it was different, like in the shoulda, coulda, woulda,
that's so true.
you know, and trying to find the motivation and the belief that some level of action can equal change, maybe not immediately, but down the line, a positive change in your life, and, to begin creating a life that you find worth living.
Mhm.
Um, But it can be hard to find that motivation and to break that cycle. And you talk about me, I always think of myself as kind of blunt, but a lot of it is because like I needed that blunt truth. And also when we have that kind of wishful, slightly delusional, grandiose thinking going on, like by the time someone sugarcoats what they're saying to us, I'm double dipping it in sugar and cinnamon inside my mind before I'm processing it,
Yep,
and then the true message isn't getting to me.
absolutely.
But there's a way to be blunt with love, and to be blunt and inspire at the same time. It's
But
right
that I
now.
think that speaks to your intentions. I mean, your intention is never to be the smartest person in the room or the most
Mm-mm.
gangster person in the room. I mean, you're authentic as it gets. I mean, as Kevin Hart says, you're real as a dirty pair of sneakers. I mean, you're legit, and there isn't a woman going to walk in the room that's going to be able to out street experience, because what's up. But at the same time, your motivation and objective is always, as since I've observed, is that you've always want to help. You
Hmm.
always want to help, and that you're not coming in trying to say, oh well, listen and look at me, I'm recovery superwoman. No, you're recognizing that you're a fellow traveler, and I respect that. I'm not trying to gush on you so much. It's just that that's one of the areas why I co-sign who you are, and why I wanted you on the show is because we need more people that are willing to have conversations with people that are real and not necessarily based on some book that says this is
Right.
how it is. So we got to meet people where they're at with
Hmm.
what's going on with them there right now
Right.
in this mess. And in that place, it requires a level of authenticity that I think the way you deliver your message comes across as caring, but sometimes it has to be, well, what got you here? You
Right.
know? So, I mean, that was some of the things that was firing off as you were talking. I didn't mean to get on so much of a speech about it, but you know, I think that's why your message carries, because you're not trying to fix anybody. You're planting seeds of hope and help that they can grow. And to your point, dipping all that candy on top of it, how they're receiving it is equally as important as what you're saying.
Right. Well, and you don't want to work harder to better someone else's life than they're willing to work. And sometimes, like I said, people kind of can, myself included, get into that kind of grandiose, wishful, delusional thinking. And for me, ultimately, it does bring me down. Like I've had some really rough years in sobriety.
Mhm.
Definitely around relationships.
Yeah.
Relationships seem to be the hardest thing to heal from, especially because I do believe people who are addicts and alcoholics, feel things much deeper than others. Hence our, spiritual malady that they speak of.
Mhm.
And it's really, really hard sometimes to hold on through those times. But, I found just kind of doing the next right thing and being there for other people. I remember early on, they told me I shouldn't be alone in my own head without a friend and a flashlight. And I'm telling you, to this day, that can still be true.
Yeah.
But it's up to me to recognize kind of like what I need to get to the next day without, imploding my life.
I was in
Um,
I was in a
which we
meeting last.
mildly do from time to time. We're not perfect.
I want to speak to that. So hold that thought about mildly, about imploding your life. Hold that thought, because I actually think that's an important one to bring up. But you just made a comment last night. So I do. I'm in meetings every day now. I haven't done that ever. And I started doing that because we got, as you know, our situation here, a lot of what's going on here. Sam and I have a lot on our plate right now. And,
Hmm.
that's to your point. We're both addicts. And so we feel differently, but also we react differently as addicts. So when we
Hmm.
feel certain things, we get in our head too long. And when we're in our head too long, then all of a sudden we create a story or a fairy tale about what actually is going on when it's had nothing to do with it. And we can actually create, not just Sam and I, but anybody that's in recovery or in addiction at all. We make stories that just aren't even true. And this guy, LA, I'll go by his code, his no, not real name, but he calls himself LA Joe. And this is an online meeting I was on. He says, left to myself, I might come to conclusions that are not accurate. And I mean, it's about the conclusions we draw when we spend too much time in our head that aren't
Right.
they're so far. Our emotional state, we, like you said, we feel things more, and in that feeling things more, we create stories and draw conclusions that are so far off the freaking path, we're causing ourselves so many more problems.
Yeah. It's like suffering because of the narratives that Like it's like for me, I create these doomsday narratives from time to time, and it's up to me to kind of reframe and remember, like, A, I don't know what's going on in the other people's heads. B, I don't know what could happen tomorrow. Anything could happen. Life as we know it could completely change upside down. I mean, as a society, as we've seen in recent years, much less as something that could take place in our personal life, as me and you have also both happened that kind of
Mhm.
turned things upside down. And so building that resilience is, I agree, it's really important.
It is. You mentioned something though, the hold in your head thing. So last night I did one of the videos I did last night on here was speaking about what does recovery look and feel like. Okay, and I was talking about I
Mhm.
speak a lot about feelings and why feelings aren't really a factor in your recovery. It's about the progress you're making, because sometimes it doesn't feel really good at all. And in fact, hope many times for me is just not looking over my shoulder anymore. It's
Mm,
just that I'm making progress. But one of the things I think that we, as society, as we're trying to solve this whole overdose and opioid epidemic, is that, oh, good, they're in rehab. Well, that's
mm.
like the worst feeling in the world for a person that's in recovery, because like the very thing we need to feel good is not there anymore. So I'm curious, how do you deal with the feeling part of this? Because recovery it's not a feel good sport.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. I have identified, like, when I know that I'm not doing so great, and
Mhm.
sometimes that can be I'm only doing the dishes once or twice a week. I'm not taking a shower every night before I go to bed like I normally do. I'm not, staying on top of laundry, and those can be like little, mile markers. And then it's like, all right, I know that if I can get one of those things done, though, I'm going to give myself credit because I
Mhm.
know I'm having a hard time, and that's still progress. I'm going to give myself credit, and if the dishes are there tomorrow, they'll be there tomorrow. It's okay. But it can go further than that, where I have times where I have to honor that maybe I need to stay in bed most of the day and put my phone on do not disturb,
Mhm.
and just kind of like meditate on things that are not upsetting to me, make sure I'm not watching upsetting things on TV. I also had a couple years in sobriety where I wasn't on the right antidepressants, and I suffer from pretty severe depression.
Mhm.
And it was to the point I'm still going to work every day, but I would cry in between each of my clients. I also went through a breakup at that time,
Mhm.
relationships.
Yep.
And I just made sure I
And
still
you had
went
a
to
lot of
work.
expectations on that relationship too.
Yeah, them bastards, but
I remember that one.
yeah,
I
and
got to say that was spiritual growth. He's still alive. I want to tell everybody.
amen.
She didn't take
I
him
didn't
out. So that
I
was
didn't take him out, and his decisions after the fact, he didn't take himself out.
yeah,
So,
exactly.
win-win
Yeah,
all the way around.
yeah.
But it's been hard, where I mean, I would still go to meetings, but
Mhm.
I didn't talk for like a year and a half. Can you imagine me not talking in a meeting for a year and a half? Like, that's how.
I can't. No, actually, knowing you now, I can't imagine that happening.
Yes, I know, but I just knew that if I kept doing the next straight thing and kept working towards some level of progress, but also giving myself credit for doing the bare minimum. Because you know what? The bare minimum is better than nothing, and it's better
It's
than going
progress.
backwards.
Yeah, it's
Right.
that the thing is, I think the biggest gift we give ourselves is some progress today. We don't have to
Mhm.
like get the ultimate goal today. Just make some progress, because there's some days and that's all you've got is that small thing. But it's something. And
Right.
like you said, maybe it's doing one dish, that's still progress. At least
Yes.
at least you're saying, okay, well, I didn't just let that continue to slide. I knocked down the pile at least a little bit.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think that the one thing that it just really struck me about what you said, I think that as you start to continue down this recovery road, you're expecting that you're going to continue to feel more and more better, and it's going to just keep getting better and better and better. And I find it doesn't, because I find that you
Mhm.
keep going through the same type of cycles, but you require more tools because they're getting more difficult. Like God in the spiritual component of this says, I know you can only handle this much right now. I'm only going to give you this much right now. But while you're here, you need to be filling your toolbox, because eventually you're going to have tougher stuff down the road. And if you're not ready for it, it's really going to be rough for you. So it's not this feel good thing. But my point is, like, you just made a comment about doing the next right thing. I think we put all these little slang cliches and all these things out there, and we just say them sometimes. We don't understand what they actually feel like. Like for you and
Mhm.
I, when we're trying to do the next right thing, sometimes that is so freaking difficult to do. And the process to
Foreign.
ourselves to do the right thing. Are you kidding me?
Mhm.
So that's tough, and I think that we brush past these small principles are so massively important. I had one that was brought up in a meeting last week that really hit me. I don't know about you, but do you, when life starts to get a little sideways, or you've made some choices that you're now paying a consequence for, do you gravitate towards the lowest point in your life, like emotionally? Do you feel like it's all falling apart again? Do you ever get there?
Yeah, and I think that's, kind of trauma related, that there's always going to be, I think of it as like an echo in the back of my mind. And I remember like in early sobriety, like crying to my sponsor and being like, when is it going to get better? And she's like, well, the more good things that happen and the more hard things you get through, the more you'll have faith that you'll be able to get to the other side. But having said that, we're still going to go through hard things, and like it is natural that it's going to remind us, of those very devastating, very real feelings and thoughts that we had back then.
Right.
So I come to expect that to an extent.
Yeah, so and I'm glad to hear you say that I'm not alone in this. I've talked to a couple other people about this, and actually my sponsor this week too about it, because um, this how do you know then the real danger for me, I don't know if this is for you, but when I start thinking that way, I might react towards it too. So
Mm-hmm.
now rather than continuing the progress where I actually am, I might start getting scramble mode, and that is going to affect my mentality and my process. And then I could easily drive myself back there just by overreacting to a circumstance. And the term that came up in that meeting I was describing, of, and I know you've heard it before, is incomprehensible demoralization.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good diagnostic tool for me. I'm not at rock bottom. In fact, I'm nowhere near rock bottom,
Yeah.
because I'm not in a situation where I'm so demoralized I can't go forward. I just am feeling the earmarks of when things really sucked. And I don't know about you, but where that really starts to hurt is when you see a loved one going through a lot. And if
Right.
you feel like you're a portion of the responsibility for it, or if you try to assume all responsibility. I mean, there's just this whole situation we have as a recovery, like you're saying, that we feel things differently than other people do.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just curious, how you handle that, because I know that you've gone through a lot in life, and as you go through this, you've got a great recovery story. You've been authentic about it, but how when things start to feel like they once did, what do you do to pull yourself out of it?
um I have to give myself time often, and what I've learned is, especially when it comes to relationships, is sometimes the closer you are to the situation and the person, the less you can do.
Mhm.
And I do come from a peer background, and now professionally, like I work with the homeless population. And the multitude of mental health and substance abuse and trauma and, learning disabilities and physical disabilities and, just these things that people are dealing with. And, to an extent, like I have to, because I care, I want to see people be healthy and happy and successful, but I have to remember, like, everybody stands the right to change their mind. Everybody stands the right to be wrong, myself included. And that the ball is in their court to, and when the ball's in my client's court or in the court of the people I care about and stuff, like it's more, I think, empowering for them when they're successful. And it also gives me less responsibility for my part in it. Because, and this isn't a personal life example, but, of clients that will set them up for detox and housing and do all this stuff. And last minute, they're like, nope. Someone called and I have a way to make a couple $100 today, and I'm going to go do that instead. And I can't take it. I can, but I try really hard not to take it personally. I try really hard to
Well,
remember
there
it's
were
not a personal attack on me and my
right.
efforts.
Well, their worldview is different than yours.
Mhm.
I mean, what you've seen, you're kind of beyond that. I mean, for my audience, not everybody is from our area. It's we have had, because of some of the guests I've had on, we're all over the place, and for many, they have a homeless issue as well that's pretty significant and well broadcast. For Rochester, they keep shuffling people around. It's like,
Yeah.
people get settled in someplace, they keep pushing them around. We don't want you here, we don't want you there. And then, to your point, getting somebody just from a place to live perspective and having any you were talking about being born with the issue with your legs and how that made you feel like less of a person. I had a very short period of homelessness, but people wouldn't look you in the eye when you're homeless. I mean, you
Hmm.
become non-human. So how, you're trying to bring a population that says there's a better life out there when they don't even feel like they're part of that life,
Right.
like, or they could ever even have access to it. And what is this new house and this new food and this treatment going to help me when the last 5 times I tried it, it didn't?
And I could really relate to that because, I grew up where they, like I said, the ADA was just passed, and they kind of, their solution was, well, we're going to have one classroom that's half all the disabled kids in that grade and half all the regular kids. And I just kind of got lumped into it and stuff, but the education was a little different. The standards were a little different, school didn't really foster me learning skills to go to college or have a career because I was perceived as someone who was disabled who would be on SSI their whole life. And then after the 8 surgeries and the opiate addiction, it was definitely reinforced through my journey of homelessness and my journey of multiple incarcerations. Um, and so I bring that as best I can because I have changed it around to help others, and I believe I can only keep this because I give it away. Um, but to be able to sit with someone who has the same level of self worth that doesn't exist and was also never fostered or taught, and to kind of be able to share that with them and celebrate the small successes, like it's life changing. And it's those little things, during the hard times that I hold on to, you
Mhm.
know. And their story might not look like my version of success I would have for them, but I still get these like rewarding pebbles that I get to hold on to and put in my pocket and bring home with me.
Right. Right. I think what's interesting is the school system back then for you had you bucketed, you know,
Hmm.
as many of the things that we deal with relative to stigma. That we experience stigmas in varying levels based on being people in recovery. So if I want to go to a medical doctor for just a medical problem, my chart's going to be loaded with all kinds of medical stuff that's related to me being a really successful drunk.
Hmm.
And so that there's gonna be a bias associated with it. Sammy and I talk about that a lot too. I mean, it was a heck of a time just trying to get her a primary care physician to deal with some skin stuff she had,
Right.
and just because of her history, they're like, oh, why would I invest? You're this, that, or whatever. And so the
Hmm.
stigma around it just really like encompasses people. But my point on this is that the school system looked at you a certain way, and what you've accomplished to get to where you are today is the highest performing capabilities that you would imagine. If you had started from some less disadvantaged place, you probably wouldn't be as strong as you are today because you wouldn't have had all those tests and
Right.
those broken seasons that helped you fortify who you became. But at the
Hmm.
same time, the level of performance it takes for somebody like you to get through with what you've gotten through, and on a lot of times had to do it on your own, is nothing short of high performance. For anybody else in any sporting event, any business situation, whatever else, that if they went through the rigor that you went through to get the life that you have, they would be considered, world beaters. And I actually mean that. It's not patronizing in any way. And I think for many of us in recovery, to get our feet underneath us and be providing to go from Lala to Momma, to go through what you had to go through to just get the certifications for the role that you're currently in,
Hmm.
to clean up some of the old baggage. Most
Yeah.
people just
You
quit.
want me to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that's really important because it
I think
shows that
it's a
even though
cool
you're clean and sober,
story.
you still got this crap you got to deal with. So yeah, I think that's a huge part of this.
Yeah. So, I, in my addiction, ran a lot, chased ideas that sounded good at the time. And one of those was few hours after a ball drop, I decided that I would have a better life in Florida. And me and my ex-boyfriend stole a truck and took our 2 New York dogs down to Florida, where I promptly ended up in jail a few weeks later. By that time, I had burned so many bridges that no one was going to send $1,000 down to bail me out. So I pled out to probation and drove the stolen truck back home. Didn't get in trouble for the stolen truck, just the hit and run with the stolen truck. So I had
I
gotten,
didn't know about that layer.
yeah,
I knew about the truck. I didn't know you added to it. Oh, we always do. But yeah.
yeah, it's always a unique story with us, right?
Yep.
um,
Jeez.
so I when I came back to New York, I had gotten in trouble a few more times. Ended up meeting the lady who brought the meetings in jail, who ultimately kind of gave me that little glimpse of hope. I started going to 12-step meetings and working the steps. And one of my big amends, my last big legal amends, was this outstanding warrant for a violation of probation for fleeing Florida, right? So I could only pass certain background checks.
This
I
was in
could
the, but
only,
timing wise, I think it's important. This has been within the last 2 years, right?
yeah. So I'm 7 years clean and sober now, and
Mm,
I was 5 years clean and sober. When I went down to Florida, I turned myself in. They weren't willing to tell me what would happen to me from New York. I even had paid for a couple lawyers and didn't get anywhere. So I went, turned myself in, and a friend from AA locally who now lives down in Florida drove 3.5 hours to be there when they arraigned me. And when the judge tried to put me in jail for 30 days with no bail, he kind of stood up and spoke on my behalf, and was the only person there to do so. But I ended up, at 5.5 years sober, going into jail in Florida for 5.5 days, and, was taking off all my meds. They have an awful meth problem down there, which is something that I wasn't as familiar with. Because in our area in New York, it's not one of the biggest drugs that we see.
right.
So and my whole mentality behind it was like, I need to get this out of the way, because it's getting in the way of better jobs that I can do. And B, like, maybe I could be a service, whether it's my story when I come back to New York, or whether it's being there for the girls in jail in Florida for those 5.5 days. So I did all that, and they the judge had told me, he's like, I don't appreciate that you've been in trouble in New York since this went down. You've been a fugitive of justice for 9 years.
Mm,
And, if I find out anything that you or your friend are telling me about, your new life is wrong, then, your next court date's not going to go good for you. And,
mhm.
luckily it did go good. I paid a lot of fines, and I came back to New York, sought better employment, and I had been fingerprinted and denied so many times that they wouldn't even fingerprint me again. So I had to call them and be like, no, I took care of that.
Mhm.
And I ended up passing the background check, and now it's I do case management, and it's a little bit more money. It's more local and with, the high needs population that I like to work with. But,
Mhm.
it was definitely an experience, because I didn't know what I was walking into.
Right. Yeah, the fact that you made it through that, most people won't even, that I've noticed recently, aren't even going for work, you know, and you went and put yourself in jail for a job. That's what
Yeah.
that's wanting work. No, I think that you that story is remarkable. I didn't realize the hit and run portion of it, but I knew about the rest of the stuff that you were going through on that one. And the thing is, I find that a lot of the systems will nowadays will scold you pretty good, but I've known a couple different people that have turned themselves in on outstanding stuff. There's a famous rap artist, Brian Trejo. He's actually a reverend now. His twin brother was shot and killed also doing street ministry work, and because he was next to somebody that got shot, they thought that he was part of a setup for this guy getting
Mm,
shot when he's actually just trying to minister to this guy. So they went back and shot him as he was walking out of his house, because
mm,
they falsely assumed he was part of a hit, and he wasn't, but he died. And so Brian ended up by uh, turning his life over to God and becoming a reverend as well, clean up his life. But he had outstanding stuff that could have put him in 3 years in prison, in the same jail of the people that shot his brother.
Mm.
I mean, that was tough to face. And this is a guy that's already, his career's already taken off. He's already a famous person. He turned himself back in, the same thing. You know, he was able to shorten the time, serve the time, put it behind him, and move on. I think a lot of times when we run from this stuff, we don't clean it up. That's the point of amends in the first place, is to help us clean up some of the history as much as we can, and then move forward.
Yeah, because it was a few bad days. And even if I had been in there for 30 days, it would have been a bad month. And no matter how sober or what kind of work I do, like I'm not exempt from having bad days or months or even years
That's powerful.
sometimes. Yeah.
So, looking at your journey where it's at, we're about 35 minutes into this. I want to make sure that, some of the things, you know, so you have two children, you have twins on the way, right? It's not more
Mm-hmm.
than twins.
Yes. One boy, one girl. I've
Oh
always
wow, I
wanted
didn't
to
know.
be a mom. And gosh, I got sober and was hoping it would happen. And, years had gone by and it didn't happen. And then, like I said, I got sober, not perfect. It happened on accident. And I'm doing it alone, but it's been a dream come true, and I'm super excited. Work has been really supportive. I just got a scholarship that to get my KSAC, so I've been still working full time and going to school 2 nights a week. A
Jeez.
KSAC for any people outside of New York is a certified alcohol and substance abuse counselor. So I'm hoping to kind of take some of my program coordinating and, light supervising experience and, kind of work my way up to be able to, have a larger ripple effect on how we address, these populations in our society that are suffering.
Well, I think that if you look at your progress, and again, progress being the real measuring stick for us, look at how on your worst days how you feel. Look at how the ladder for your life has gone. You know, it's
Hmm.
climbing because you chose to make it climb, and for you, you've decided that you were going to have a life more than what that other life was offering you. Even though for a season that seemed like the only option to at least make you feel good for 1 minute, well, those 1 minutes always turn into multiple days and more problems and more destruction that you have more to climb out of. And so by not going backwards and by going forward, you clearly have demonstrated for others and for yourself that you can be a high performing person and have a life that you want.
Well, I found it's like I can either be miserable in a cage or institution, or I could just be miserable in my own life that I have now. And
Mhm.
like I said, sometimes we're not exempt to having some misery, but the suffering I think is optional. I think that there is something to be said about kind of waiting out those feelings, because it's healthy to feel them. It's normal to feel disappointment or sadness or grief, but just knowing that there is another side to it, and hanging in there. It's a lot easier said than done, but we have to give ourselves the small victories. Like you said, if I
Mhm.
washed half the dishes and still left the icky pans in the sink, like, oh well, you know, we got
Yeah.
cups plates for tomorrow.
I was actually using you to validate what that because I actually just did that. So,
Oh, that's so funny.
yeah, so the stovetop's covered in like egg grease. My son made eggs and made a mess, and then the rest. So that's just kind of. But some of them are done, so you feel like there's some progress there.
Right.
Um, so life right now sounds like things are improving for you. I guess as we start to wrap this up, I mean, um, what does hope look like for you now, and what would you tell somebody else out there that in varying degrees, maybe they're just starting the recovery journey, or they're peeking their head in here because they just can't take it anymore.
Oh man, what does hope look like? You know, Sometimes it's knowing when to take action and when to be still, right? And we don't always get to know that, but I think we do know what is not the right action. And so I think like sometimes being still over not taking an action that we know is not going to benefit us is really powerful. I don't know if we always have that hope, but I think we can find it in stillness and some points. Because I can be, like how you described yourself, like sometimes a little reactive, based on
Mhm.
some of the things that are happening and past narratives in my mind and
Mhm.
whatnot. But just taking like really that time to before I, go and do something that I'm gonna regret.
Mhm.
Those bad decisions will be there tomorrow if we want to make them.
That's a
You
good
know,
point. That's a really good point.
they will be. Like we could just sit still today and see how we feel tomorrow, you know,
That's actually a
and
really
do
good
the
point.
same thing tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah, I had an incident this week that really had me kind of thinking the old Chris way, and but you're correct. As those bad decisions that I held off on, I did have the option to do that tomorrow.
Yeah. So, and I mean, and I don't know if that necessarily like I said, sometimes hope doesn't look pretty. Sometimes hope doesn't feel good. Sometimes it's just, getting through those hard moments so that way we can capitalize on the better moments. Sometimes we need to preserve our energy so that way when those good moments come, we are able to capitalize on them and feel the positive feelings that we associate with hope.
Right. So, is there anything you want? Any plugs you want to put out there for anything you're involved in? Any programs you want to give a shout out to?
I'm still involved with Hope Dealers from time to
Okay.
time. We do outreach on North Clinton, hand
Yeah.
out hot and cold meals. So they got a meal for later as well and clothes. Um, I'm still involved in 12-step programs and, definitely encourage them. There's some nifty ones out there like Al-Anon or Adult Children of Alcoholics. And I think that there's something to be said about being kind of well rounded and finding as many tools as you can. Therapy and AA and things like that are not the end all be all. And I have friends now from various programs that are very close in my life. So I just want to kind of say, find your niche and find your people and hold on.
Yeah. You just said nifty, which basically just blew the entire interview. I haven't heard nifty in a long time.
I could have said nitty gritty. That's my other new one lately. I'll be like, the
Nifty.
nitty gritty of it is.
All right. Well, that I'll take nitty gritty over nifty. I haven't heard nifty in forever. All right.
That's
Well, I
funny.
appreciate you coming on, Kayla.
Yeah,
It
thanks for
sounds like
having me.
things it sounds like things are going in the right direction. And for the audience, I'm hoping that you guys could glean some stuff out of this. Um, Kayla and I have a similar view on how to get through this. It's about progress. Many days are not going to feel good. It's about doing the next best thing, but the next right thing based on what you have to work with.
Right.
There's a lot on your plate. There's a lot that you're going to be going through. There's nothing about this is going to be easy. Oftentimes we feel alone, but it's not because people aren't willing to help us. We remove ourselves from situations that allow us to get the help. So be
Yeah.
present, show up. You don't have to participate, but surround yourself with people that have victory in their lives, and you'll find it eventually too. It rubs off on you if you hang around long enough.
Yes, it does.
Guys, thanks for tuning in. Between now and the next time we talk, I'm going to do everything I possibly can do to stay out of trouble, and I hope you do too.